Bureaucracy in Germany. It sounds really good in English. Bureaucracy in Germany. Some people would say, a great word, the best word ever. Of course, we don't. We are in Germany and we do not show exuberant cheerfulness. But what is it really like with bureaucracy in Germany? Is there so much bureaucracy than elsewhere? Do you live in a country where you don't have to file a tax return? I do. Welcome to YD. Why do Germans do things the way they do? Let's imagine typical German. Let's call him Thomas Müller. Let's say Thomas Müller is single, 35 years old, and lives here in the flat for rent and works right down here in that restaurant and has done so for 8 years. The regular bureaucracy that Thomas has to deal with is renewing his identity card every 10 years. He probably has to send a new passport photo to his health insurance company at the same interval so that he get a new up-to-date health card. Contact with the authorities every 10 years is not that much of bureaucracy. He rents a flat, doesn't have to look after it, and receives an annual utility bill from the landlord. As he doesn't have to travel to work, he can't deduct anything from his tax bill, and if he doesn't have to pay tax to anything else, he doesn't even have to file a tax return. More details can be found in paragraph 46 of the Income Tax Act. If he has been newly employed here, he provides his tax number and state which health insurance fund he is insured with. The employer then calls up the tax details for the next payroll from the tax authorities and informs the health insurance fund electronically that the member now has a new job. Not so much bureaucracy for Thomas either. If Thomas were now Austrian and had moved to Germany, he would receive the tax number as soon as he had registered. He could also instruct his new employer to do this if he does not yet have one. The employer can also register him with the company's typical statutory health insurance scheme, so not much bureaucracy as an EU foreigner. If he has moved because of the new job, he must register with the Einwohnermeldeamt city's residence registry office within 14 days. Why is that? This means that a new tax office may be responsible for him. The share of income tax revenues goes to the new municipality, and the election documents are sent automatically, to name just a few points. So by registering or re-registering, various things are automatically organized in the background. If our Thomas meets a new partner, it could be that they want to move in together. The landlord may have to be informed depending on what is in the tenancy agreement. If the partner moves as a result, she must also register. If they get married at some point, they have to go to the Standesamt registry office, which can theoretically be quick. Here's a whole video on marriage customs and rules in Germany. The legal minimum is a registry office, and through data exchange, the tax office will also find out about your marriage. You would have to inform the tax office how you want to divide your tax classes if you both work. If your partner is included in the statutory health insurance scheme because he or she does not work and is subject to social insurance contributions, you must also inform the health insurance fund of this. You will then be asked every year whether anything has changed. If there are children, you have to register the birth at the registry office and then receive the birth certificates for applying for child benefit and the like. And of course, the tax authorities are also automatically informed, and the new citizens receive his or her first letter with the tax number. The statutory health insurance fund also asks about children every year whether anything has changed. When you hear this, it's hard to understand why there is so much bureaucracy in Germany. Well, on the one hand, this is the case for Germans and EU citizens who are employed and subject to social security contributions. If you come from a third country, You first need a visa, and depending on the visa, you may have to make annual appointments with the authorities to prove how your studies are going, whether your livelihood is still secure, or whether there have been any changes to the requirements for the visa. If I want to register a business, there's a whole bureaucracy of its own, from membership in the Chamber of Crafts or the Bar Association to register the business, working with healthcare insurance companies, or for the Berufsgenossenschaft, Employers Liability Insurance Association. What? You don't know the Berufsgenossenschaft? Here's a whole video about this social security organization. They do their taxes or have them done and report regularly to the tax authorities. This is probably no different in other countries either. For building project, it gets a bit more complicated. I've also videos about building your own home from buying to renting to building. Depending on the case, such commercial construction must be authorized, and if it exceeds a certain size, whether in height or dimension, it must also be checked whether it has an impact on nature. For new wind turbines, the application authorizations and expert reports often fill several folders before the first thought can be turned. Fire protection, noise protection, and general insulation regulations must also be observed for residential buildings. These are partly the reason why the construction of new houses in Germany is more expensive than elsewhere. One reason is partly the need to protect citizens and nature. Therefore, a building, but also a product or medicine, must first of all prove that it's not harmful. And when we do this in relation to the environment, we have to check whether a particular animal or plant species worthy of protection is actually native to the area. If so, whether it's affected. Another reason is that there should be no opportunity for bribery at any point. Therefore, the rules are the same for everyone and it has to go through various checks. So for the individual Germans, the bureaucracy is not that high, but for business people, it may be greater than in other countries. And if you're not an EU citizen, the bureaucracy hurdles are even higher. Remarks, addition, and comments in the comments. Thank you for your attention. See you in the next video.